Welcome back to the Modern Moms Roadmap to Balance podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Nettleton, and today my guest is Becca Post. She is a licensed clinical social worker and self-development coach, passionate about helping people create lasting change in their lives. She lives in Utah with her husband, their 2-year-old son, and their puppy. As the owner of a thriving group mental health practice, Becca has dedicated her career to supporting others in their healing journeys. She is also the creator of the Forward Model of Change, a unique framework designed to help individuals continue their growth and transformation beyond therapy. Welcome, Becca. I'm so excited you're here.
I'm excited.
So before we dive into stuff, with the question I ask everyone, what is your definition of a balanced life?
Gosh, I've been sitting on this since you said the question. I feel like as a mom, my initial response was like, what is balance and does it even exist anymore? And is it a real thing? But honestly, this is kind of a funny story. When I was working with a values and goal coach earlier this year, balance was one of my values as a Libra sun. And I have a Libra in my chart. I am always constantly seeking balance. And I started describing it as cozy. For me, a balanced life is this coziness that's slightly chaotic with these really grounding practices. So I would think of it from our house. Our house is just very cozy, but there's kind of clutter everywhere. So balanced is me being able to tolerate the clutter with these moments of really big clarity.
I love that. I am totally here for people's definitions being a word or a feeling. If I'm feeling this way, then I know that I'm balanced, versus I have to have all of these things in place for my life to be balanced, because that is impossible.
That went right out the window when I had a child. It was nice before that, and now it's game over.
Oh, absolutely. I think balance is attainable when you don't have children. But when you have children, having that idea of balance where everything is getting your attention equally just isn't possible, because now you're in charge of another human.
Yeah. I regularly talk about a lot now with my clients and in the workshops that I lead about how before I would say I was a deeply consistent person. I was relatively consistent and I was reliable and I was dependable. I was on time. And then I got pregnant and I had hyperemesis for my pregnancy, and that blew everything up in my face. I have just moved into this season, and the internal perfectionist part of me just keeps hoping that as my son ages, it will go away. I think it's just motherhood, and I'm trying really hard to allow that to be true and accept that. Just a straight up season of inconsistency. There is no more consistency as in who I am and what my capacity is. Every day I wake up and I'm it feels like choose your own adventure, but it's dictated by a toddler who can't use his words and was mad this morning about not being able to touch the mountains from the car. Right.
Oh no.
And I'm this is not, no
that is a whole nother level of, no, I want the purple cup. And you're we don't even have purple cups.
Yeah. Oh no. This was he's sitting in his car seat screaming because he can't touch the mountains, which are literally not walkable.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It was wild.
Yeah. And I have a 3-year-old or 2-year-old. He'll be 3 in January. I feel like it gets a little bit more consistent when they're in school. It feels a little bit easier. I mean, even though my youngest is in daycare, it still feels a bit inconsistent with him, because then he doesn't have all of these things to look forward to. It's kind of the same every day, versus in school, it might be a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll let you know when we get there. I'll send you a DM.
So before we hit record, we were starting to talk about human design. And I'm really excited because when I think about human design and how I use it for myself, it has really changed the acceptance I have for my kids and the amount of energy that they have. So for people who are what are you talking about? let's just talk
Yeah.
about human design because I know you also use this in your
Mm-hmm.
practice, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about human design. What is it?
Yeah, so human design came about in the 1980s, and it's 5 Eastern energetic sciences combined into one model. And honestly, actually, the reason, those people apparently stand on a mountain and like create a model of something, I don't really fully know how it works as someone who that's not how it worked when I created a model of support, was to actually support parents in learning that their children are energetically different than they are. So we kind of start to break almost like the idea of conscious parenting. We start to break the idea that my child is a mini version of me, therefore I project all of their stuff onto me, and instead be able to look at your child and say, oh, you are not like me. You have aspects of me. There are
Yeah.
things that are similar, but you are not me. And energy wise, you are not even designed to be remotely like me. And so human design allows people to understand their energetic role in society, the way that they make decisions, how they take on or don't take on other people's energy, their gifts, the way that they show up in the world. And also from a therapeutic standpoint, the way I use it is like, this is the way that you came out, the nature. And then we get to talk about all the ways it was nurtured because everything in your human design chart is conditionable.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you mean by conditionable?
Well, a good example is that I am a very empathetic and emotional not emotional individual, but empathetic to other people's emotions. And I grew up in a family where there was a lot of emotions. And what was conditioned for them from their growing up from my parents and my brother was that they're not emotional. They just like didn't have the emotional intelligence to label what they were feeling. But what I would do was feel it and then act it out. And what became
Okay.
the narrative for me growing up was that I am too much. I
Okay.
have
Yeah.
too many emotions. Becca is too feeling. And when I found human design and I looked at everybody's charts and I was like, haha, that's funny. I'm actually the non-emotional in my family. I'm the one who just mirrors everybody else's emotions. But the
Yeah.
conditioning became that I'm too feeling. I feel too much. When really they didn't have the language or the tools to even begin to describe how they felt.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking like some people might be thinking, well, isn't that just like an excuse in terms of you're just using this to blame something for the way you are? But I like to look at this like this is a different way to understand myself and even the people in my life that I interact with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
This can help with understanding them better.
Mm. And I think for me, the reason it really clicked was it didn't actually feel like I was blaming someone anymore. It felt like I had answers to why I felt like I was two people. This person that I internally felt like, and then this other person that the world told me I was. And I struggled for many, many years and still sometimes do with that duality of like, there is a way that the people in my life see me. And I'm so afraid of letting that version go. But there's also a deeper part of me that has never felt like that makes sense. And I've spent many, many years in therapy trying to negotiate how to be both of those people. And human design helped me see what I was meant to be doing and how my gifts were there and where I should be using them and how my energy works and why things in my life didn't totally make sense. It just gave me this like sense of validation ultimately. And I can say that I've done this, I don't know, probably, I want to say maybe 100 readings now. I've done a lot of
Wow.
readings
That's
because
a
I,
lot. Yeah.
yeah, I do them with our therapy clients. I do them with my own therapy clients. I use them with all of my coaching clients. I do friends, family, like all sorts of different ones now. And I I have never had a client actually or a reading at the end be like, now I feel like everything is someone else's fault. They've all like either cried or emailed
Oh,
me after and
yeah.
been like, I've never felt so seen And I think mental health is getting a bad rap because of some things that are going on in like TikTok world and social media, where it's like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
always about blaming the people who gave you
Hmm.
the patterns. And I think human design actually really opens us up to see like, no, I can
Hmm.
look at this chart and see where our differences are, and I can understand why that happened. And I can then have
Yeah.
empathy without blaming. And now I can shift.
Hmm. And I mean, I definitely would not put a lot of emphasis on someone who's trying to blame other people for why we are the way we are. You have to look at how those things have impacted you, but not in a way to blame, like it's all of their fault. So
Yeah.
just a just a
Yeah.
caution
As
when looking
anybody
for
who's
a
also a
therapist.
parent, your kid, like the best thing my therapist ever said to me is you're gonna F your kid up in an entirely different way than you were because you're aware of how that happened to you and you're gonna do it in the way that you are unaware. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's not comforting, but also deeply comforting. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally get it because I think that's, I don't want to say every mom's fear, but a lot of moms have the fear of, I'm going to mess up my kid. I'm going to mess up my kid in the way that my parents messed me up. Or even like my parents were amazing and I'm not as amazing as my parents and I'm going to F my kid up.
Yeah.
We do not have control over
Mm-mm.
how our children perceive our actions or what we're doing, even if it's in the most loving way. And that's where it's like sometimes effing your children up in like one way, not maybe like totally, is sometimes inevitable.
Yeah. And honestly, that's where for me, knowing my child's human design and being married to someone who is very, very logical and like that's not the way that he views everything. So there's a lot of balance in that has helped me have some distance from his behaviors and the way that he's learning and especially sleeping because my son's energy type is like bursts of energy and then like really big rest periods. He has a lot of those. So sleep training was like not a thing
Okay.
because he and I was like, what are we doing wrong? And eventually we did get to do sleep training, but it wasn't until he could start to articulate his
Mm,
desire for sleep or desire for rest. But being able to be like, this kid is going to have days where he sleeps like 5 hours at night, and that's just how he's going to be. And then there's going to be days where he sleeps like 14. And that is for
wow.
me, as someone who craves consistency, is hard. And understanding his human design has helped me be like, this is who he is. And it's given me space to be like, that's okay. And I can just kind of
Yeah.
roll with it a little bit better than being like, why? What is wrong with me for you not sleeping?
Mm, yeah. And you can access your child's human design like the day they were born because it's all based on when they were born, where, the time. Am I missing
Mm-hmm.
anything else?
City and country.
Yeah.
Now they ask you for the country.
Okay.
That's it.
So it's based off that. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I was first getting ready to get my human design, I almost didn't do it because I was like, oh, this is probably going to take like a whole long time. I'm probably going to have to answer all of these questions and let them know all of these things about me. No, it's just based on those
2
things.
seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're thinking like, oh, I want to look it up, just do it. It's so life-changing. And so Becca, can you speak a little bit about the different types? I know that there's so much more than type in human design, but these are kind of like the major things in terms of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's always the key place for me where I start with people. For any of your listeners, and we can like obviously talk about this too offline, is like I love doing family readings. So we can
Ooh,
drop that in your notes where I
okay.
have a package because I actually just did another version of this for a mother mind group and I gave them a discount on the 3 reading package where I did like the moms and then I did the kids and the husbands or partner and then we do one reading where we talk about how they all interact. And the reason is because honestly, also human design, they say it takes 7 years to even become remotely and like efficient in it and
Oh,
understanding
okay.
it.
Yeah, I
So
see.
like if people will go to read their charts and they'll be like, this means nothing to me. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
fair. Also, if you go pull your own chart and you're like, this makes no sense to me, that's fair. And like find someone that you trust to help you dive a
Mhm.
little bit deeper. But for the most part, human design breaks people into one of 5 energy types. And an energy type is the role that you're here to play in a society. It's essentially your energetic role and what you're here to support as a culture, what we're doing. And
Mm.
so the 5 types are all intertwined. And the belief is that as a society, you need all 5 to function.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, then as a family, you don't get all 5, just as an FYI, because
No,
depending on
I
how big
know.
your family is, you might get more of some than others.
Yes.
And
Yeah, because
so,
we're, just to speak on that, we're a family.
of 5, you said.
We are a family of 5.
And you
Like
don't
I
got
was
all of
telling,
them.
like I was telling Becca before we hit record, we're a family of 5. My husband and I are both projectors, and you'll figure this out in a minute. And my children we have 2 generators
Yeah.
and 1 manifesting generator. So just keep that in mind as Becca is talking about these different types.
Yeah. You don't get to pick. So the types exist as like a role, right, that we energetically play. So the first type is a manifester. And these are the idea peoples. This is how I explain it to people. This is your friend that you go on vacation with who just kind of goes missing and comes back 6 hours later and you don't know where they went, but they're like, I just had the best time. And you're like, we've just spent all of our time looking for you. Why didn't you answer your phone? Those are manifestors. They're the idea people. They're literally here to like do an idea, do their own thing, and kind of have this energy about them that people are either really drawn to or really repulsed by, which is something I'm learning to experience because my son is a manifester. And I also have a lot of manifestor clients. So on the therapeutic side, I'm always really fascinated with how they turn out because they get conditioned very, very heavily because they're a lot. I mean, I have one, he's 2, and it is a wild, wild ride. So they're like maybe 9% of the population. You can have a generator, which is what 2 of your kids are, which is also what I am, which are the worker bees of a society. They're here to do, but only do what brings them joy. They are good at doing, and I learned this the hard way. This is partially where the conditioning comes in because generators are good at doing. You can be good at anything that you can do. And then one day you wake up and you're like, I hate this. And then you burn it to the ground. And so generators are always having to pay attention to like, am I actually giving my energy to what brings me joy, and pleasure, and excitement? And if it doesn't, how do I adjust it? But our society is also wired for generators because we function in this very like 9 to 5 world where you should be go, do. Monday through Friday, you're at your career or in school. And then on the weekend, you have your free time and you get to relax and reset. So we've built our society for generators, which is fair because they're 72% of the population or something like that.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah.
They're a majority of the population. Then you have manifesting generators, which are the other majority of a population. They cover like 10 or no, more than 10% because they're like, it makes up 80% between generators and manifesting generators, like a majority. Manifesting generators have the power of being a manifester, which is to create ideas, and the doing of a generator. So they're here to be your multi-passionate people in your life. Like if you have that friend who has like 27 hobbies and never completes a single one, that's a manifesting generator. They're just like here to try and do all the things, to be multi-passionate, to have a bunch of things going on at the same time. And the beauty of being a manifesting generator is that you have that brake and accelerator. So you have the brake that says like, I'm done doing this, I'm going to go do something else. But you also have the ability to like run with something that you want to do. Then we have projectors, which is what you are. And the projectors are like maybe 7-10% of the population. Please, no one be calculating my numbers because it's definitely not going to add up to 100 because I have number dyslexia. But they are the seers. So projectors tend to energetically feel very closed off until you invite them into something where they say something and it's so profound that you're like, how did that just happen? And they have to be invited in. They have to feel included. So they're like your coworker or your friend that you ask for feedback and then they give you feedback and you're like, why didn't you tell me that sooner? Why didn't you see it? They end up usually being some sort of healer or problem solver. They like to be the expert. They like schooling systems, but they require deep, deep rest. They don't
Yes.
have ample energy, and they don't have these cycles that manifestors do where they have rest and they have creativity. Projectors are like, I need to rest in order to even just like give a remote amount of energy to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then the most rare type is reflectors, and they are here to mirror everything that's happening in a society. So a lot of the times they're completely open to the energy in the world. They really struggle to find where they fit because everywhere that they go, they're mirroring what's happening. And those are
Mhm.
like really key ones, but that's why they're rare, right? Because they're here to highlight all the gaps.
And that's all of them, right?
Hmm.
Okay. As a projector, just because I'm a projector, but you were describing them as the person that you come to get like feedback. And then when they give you the feedback, that person is thinking, why didn't you tell me this sooner? And the reason it's not good for projectors to tell you sooner is because a lot of the times you're just not ready to hear the feedback. So we
Hmm.
need to wait for you to ask us so that we're preserving our energy and not just wasting it on giving people feedback that they don't want to hear or they're not ready to hear.
Yeah, which makes them really good at being therapists.
Yes. Because if someone is coming into our office and they're ready to hear the feedback, for the most part, sometimes you're not, but that's okay. We'll
Yeah,
get there.
exactly. One day.
Yeah. But I think that is so awesome that you do the family readings and helping families to understand each other better because as a projector, my husband's also a projector. And also want to say just because you're the same energy type doesn't mean y'all are going to be the same or even similar. Because even with myself and my husband being projectors, we're still really different
Mhm,
because that's just one part of your human design.
mhm.
It's not the entire thing.
Yeah.
There's so much other complexity to it.
And a lot of it depends on the way you grew up and how people around you accepted or respected or your energy and the way that
Mhm.
you used it. Like it changes everything. It's so, so nuanced. And that's where people get really caught up is like, this is the fix all. And I have a strong, strong belief in the way that I practice and the way that I work that like
Mm.
holistic tools are here to validate your experience and support you, but they're not here to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like you can go and get an ADHD diagnosis, and just because you know you have ADHD doesn't mean that's going to fix your problems. Like, okay, so
No,
you know you're this, or you have this quality, or you have this thing that's impacting the way you live or how you see the world. Now you can go and find the tools that's going to help you live in this world.
exactly. Exactly. So you still have to do the work to do it, which is actually how I started using human design in my therapy practice was to actually make therapy more efficient for clients because I could narrow in
Mm.
exactly what was going to work, what would be more helpful, how I as a therapist was going to interact with them, and then like actually build the tools pretty quickly and making them really, really practical and adjacent for someone instead of being like, try this, try this. It was like, you
Yeah.
like it's just that's not going to work. Okay, so let's try this right off the bat. It helps significantly.
Yeah. Versus trying to give a projector a whole bunch of homework that they're just not going to be able to do, or it's not helpful for them.
Yeah, or the biggest thing is like generators and manifesting generators, which as I mentioned, make up a majority of a population. As a clinician, I know that a generator, a manifesting generator sitting across from me in a room needs direct questioning that they can feel in their body and have some sort of response to. And as a
Mhm.
clinician, you're taught to only use open ended questions. And this was like mind
Yeah.
blowing for me when I learned I was a generator. I was like, oh, this is why every time my therapist asks me, what are we going to work on today? I look at her dumbfounded because that's not something for me to respond to. So it
Mhm.
changes the way that you actually interact with the client versus when I have a projector client, I know that I have to call them in. So a lot more of my time with them is very much spent saying, like, how does that make you feel? What are you noticing? What are you doing? Versus even my manifestor
Mhm.
clients is so much of me spending time being like, how do you want to communicate that to me? Because you're here to inform. What are you trying to say? How do we get your voice to work? How do
Yeah.
you learn to express yourself? Like, just knowing those energy types alone changes the way that you interact with that person and then
Yeah.
helps them feel really seen, which makes the work move.
Mhm. Oh yeah. And just as an example, like for my son, my oldest son, he's a generator. And it's so much easier for me to ask him questions like, do you want to do this karate camp No. Okay. Are you sure you don't want to do this karate camp? Is this? No, I don't want to do it. Would you want to do this if it was soccer? Yes. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay. Because sometimes I'm thinking, does he just want to play video games all day? Or is it he's really not interested in this ninja camp? His love is soccer and video games.
Mhm.
And so those are the things that he's going to do. Everything else, nah, I'm good. It's just soccer, video games. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and it's just wild because then it also creates, as you as the parent, it almost gives you a little bit more balance if we're like coming back to that idea, because you get to say like, okay, this is where he is. And now I'm not going to push until he
Mhm.
changes his interests. And when he changes his interests, I'll know. Right. It
Yeah.
almost creates this more sense of trust. That's definitely not a correct grammatical phrase, but a sense of trust for you as the parent that's like, my kid will actually tell me what they
Mhm.
want if I'm actually listening.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. And speaking of that, so you were talking about how using this in therapy has been really helpful, but you also use this in your coaching. Can you talk
Mhm.
about your coaching, this forward model healing? Okay, I
You're
butchered
good.
that.
You're good. It's a tongue twister. Forward model of
Say it.
change.
Forward model. I was trying to put
Yeah.
healing in there.
Yeah, I know.
Forward model of change. That's
It,
why.
it's like a whole thing. Yes. So I built my therapy practice 5 years ago now. I've been in the field for a little bit longer than that. And I started very early on in my career, always working with other therapists. I had a lot of other therapist clients very early on,
Okay.
even as a new therapist, which is not something other therapists usually like. And I have a very old soul. I think that's what it is. And then working with clients who had been in therapy for extensive periods of time, which is myself included. Like I fall into that category. I've been in therapy since I was 10. And basically, my learning in therapy was that I was always going to be in therapy because I was anxious and there were things. And that's the narrative my clients had as well, right? Like come in and they're like, I just know I'm supposed to be here because I've always been told I'm supposed to be here. I have had all these things happen to me. I'm like, don't like do these things well or this well. And I was like, why is nobody teaching anybody how to integrate their mental health into their life and educating
Yeah.
people on the phases where they tend to exit because they've kind of done some work? And that is actually what our forward model of change is built on, was built on how I started explaining the process of change to clients when they would come in. Because people start therapy for a variety of reasons, but they
Mhm.
actually exit therapy for very common reasons. We don't talk about that enough in a field, right? So
Yeah.
people end up leaving therapy. Like, so our model breaks it down into like, you start therapy, you come in for a reason. Usually it's some sort of crisis or something's not working in your
Mhm.
life. You want something to change. Okay, when we get you to the place of like there's a comfort around what you want to change, people are usually like, bye. They leave. They're like, this
Yes.
thing is fixed. Da, 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 da. But if they stay, what I started to notice was that they start to develop a sense of awareness around all of these things in their life. They start
Mm.
to understand, they start to be able to be like, oh, this crisis happened, or these feelings happened, or these patterns exist because.
Mhm.
And then once we got to that place, they'd be like, okay, peace out, because I have enough information. I'm good.
Mhm.
I'm fixed. You healed me. And they would leave therapy. But then what I noticed is if people stayed, what started to happen was we would recognize and change the patterns. You start to be able to
Mhm.
recognize and reflect on the patterns, right? Because you have this sense of awareness. You have this place that you can be to start to see the patterns play out, which allows you then to choose differently. But then once people
Mhm.
change patterns, they're like, okay, I'm good. And they leave. Right.
Yes.
So it just became
Yeah.
these places where it was like these exit points that we just weren't talking about. And also being able to explain to people that once you got to the pattern part, you had to actually process what it meant to change them.
Oh, yeah.
And you
Yep.
have to be able to
Mhm.
process and tolerate and build the tolerance for what that change means, right? Because you can change your relationship and recognize the pattern you have with food or your spouse or the way that you communicate. But until you change it, you're not going to see the consequences of the change, which is where people really, really don't like to go,
Mhm.
myself included. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to change the thing that's going to throw everyone off because then I have to tolerate everyone being thrown. Like it becomes a whole cycle, right?
Yeah.
But then eventually we get to this place where we actually have to figure out how to integrate the change. So our model walks people through, these are the places you get to when you stay, but also
Mhm.
this is where we see therapy needing to shift into a more coaching role. Because we in America really like to pit coaching and therapy against one another, probably because one
Yeah.
is super regulated, one is not regulated enough. And to be
Mhm.
fair, that is a whole issue.
Yeah.
And if you break down the purpose of them both, we need them both, right? Because
Mhm.
therapy is here to help you process the whys and the past and these things, but therapists are not trained what to do with that information once you're trying to build life.
Yeah.
Coaches are.
Mhm.
Coaches are not here
Mhm.
to process your trauma and those things with you. They're here
Mhm.
to figure out how to help you function in your life.
Mhm.
Well, our model became, why are we not using both? Right? Why are we not saying once a client gets to this place in therapy where they don't need to keep processing, we actually need them to kind of stop processing. And I need you to figure out like
Yes.
how to be in your life without
Mhm.
psychoanalyzing. And I didn't have that experience until I hired my first coach in
Mm.
2020 when she was like, yeah, I don't really like
Wow.
care about all that stuff. I
Yeah.
want to figure out what you're doing with it that makes you build it. And that was actually where the whole foundation of my business came from, because
Mhm.
she was like, why aren't you doing this with people? Why aren't you
Yeah.
helping them do exactly what you're doing? And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, that's that's what your work has done, is get
Mhm.
you here. And I was like, uh, oh, so like I don't have to keep
Yeah.
like telling you about my childhood trauma and my relationship with my mom that still impacts me today. She's like, no, there's a time and a place for that.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is very different. And it became this like, oh, I can build my life around what I know about my mental health, about my trauma, that
Yeah.
makes my life actually more easeful.
Mhm.
And so that's what
Yes.
we do with this model, right? Is we help people understand that healing is not linear. Even though our model looks
Mhm.
linear, if you go on our website, it is a picture and it is linear. But you're gonna go
Yes.
back and forth in it. And that's
Mhm.
what we're trying to normalize, is that you're gonna go through phases where you don't need therapy.
Mhm.
But you might still want
Yeah.
support, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. But then there are gonna be places where you need to go back to therapy.
Mhm.
Things are gonna
Yeah.
come up. My
Mhm.
kid made me go back to therapy. That
Your
happened. I
kids
don't have a
will
coach right
likely,
now.
yeah. Your code, your if you are listening and you don't have kids, because there's relevant things in this podcast
Yeah,
that are
totally.
relevant to people without kids. But if you are listening and you don't have kids, when you have kids, you will likely want to go to therapy because it's just such a life-changing thing to live life with this other person who depends on you.
Yeah. Same thing if you get married. Same thing if you get a
Yes.
dog. Like my dog also made me had to go back to therapy, because that was when I realized I did not have a secure attachment, right? Because your
Mm,
dog is this thing that loves you unconditionally no matter what. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm so uncomfortable by it.
it's like, get away
I
from
need to
me.
go to therapy. And our dog trainer at the time was like, you need more therapy. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. I don't know what to do with this thing that just loves me. Because I grew up in like one of those families where we kind of had to earn love.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so like to just have this thing want to cuddle me and be around me, I was like crawling out of my skin, right? But at the same time, I didn't necessarily after that need therapy. I needed someone to help me be like, okay, what does this practically look like in your life? And so
Yeah.
that's where, again, our forward model of change was kind of born.
That's awesome. So because it's not therapy, if someone's listening, they're like, I really want to work with Becca. I have been to therapy for a long time and I think I need something different. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, through social media is like our biggest thing. Our website, they're both forwardhealing.co, .co,
Okay.
not .com. Have to clarify that. And that's honestly the easiest way. You can learn about our model, you can learn about what we do. I manage our social media. So like if you DM us, it will be coming to me. So like happy to answer any
Yeah.
questions. I do work across state lines, across the country, across multiple countries now with coaching. I primarily do all of our coaching, and then I have a team of therapists who do the therapy part. And so
Okay.
I love working with it, and we'll use your human design. We'll do all the things and we'll implement and integrate the tools, even especially when you become a parent. You're like, I've done a lot of therapy and I don't know how to make this look. And I'm like,
Mm,
cool, me neither. We can figure it out together.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you say, because there are a good amount of therapists who are also good at the coaching part too. How would a client recognize, like, maybe my therapist just doesn't know how to do the coaching piece? Like, she's a really great therapist, but not maybe like a coach. How would they know that?
Mm. I think the biggest thing is if you find yourself continuing to talk about the same things with no forward movement, and you aren't feeling like you're being pushed towards growth, but rather like continuing to process things, you feel either like you're like, I'm just stuck,
Mm,
or I don't want to actually keep processing. So a lot of it is your response to the way you're interacting with your therapist, because we all get real comfy with our therapists and it becomes really easy to stay and a
yeah.
lot harder to leave and start over. But what happens when you start over with someone, or you even just add someone new? So I see a lot of coaching clients who are still sometimes see their therapist like once a month. And what you do though is you meet a new version of yourself. Like you're meeting a
Mm,
new version of you now, knowing all the things you didn't know when you first met your therapist. Your therapist is seeing you from the point that you entered their office to who you are now, but you sometimes need to meet who you are now again with a new person.
yeah. I love that. I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Becca, for coming on the show. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to re-listen to this episode. And do you have a human design place or something that if someone was just wanting to look up human design or interested in getting to know more about it, where's like a trusted place that you look
Yeah, so
at?
a friend of mine actually runs a human design community called Human Design Community, something like that. She actually is the one who trained me in it. And I
Okay.
would do her resources for sure. And I'll send those to you so you can drop them in as well. And
We'll put those in the
then
show notes.
honestly, like Talking Body Graph is where everybody should pull their own human design from. And it is free. You don't have to pay for it. There will be an option to, but you don't have to get your human design.
Okay,
That's just
cool.
the main website. Mhm.
So we'll drop all of that in the show notes. And thanks again for joining us, Becca.
Yeah, thank you.